So hello, my name is Graham Thursby and I work for Bond, which is British Overseas NGOs for Development. I'm going to talk to you today about our small organisation listening exercises in relation to safeguarding that took place in February of this year. Bit more about me. I lead the coordination and delivery of our safeguarding work at Bond to try and secure sector-wide improvements in the quality and consistency of safeguarding in the development assistance and humanitarian aid sector. I'm going to split it into sort of two parts. Going to start with some safeguarding resources that we have available at Bond that are sort of really fantastic and are worth to promote. And then I'm going to move on to talking about what we learned at our exercises and what we're going to do, how we're going to sort of put some learning in place after them. So our safeguarding work started in February of 2018. And that was obviously around the time of the media scandals, what happened with sort of Oxfam and Save the Children. And the work very much kicked off after the FCDO's, or Foreign Commonwealth Development Office's, Safeguarding Summit in the October of 2018. And we're striving to make changes in the following four areas. So the first one being survivor support and enhanced accountability. So this is very much around looking after our survivors and they do report to us. We want to improve organisational capacity and capability. Cultural change, which I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, and how you can potentially do this within your organisations too. And then those minimum standards as well. Sort of pre-2018, there was very little minimum standards in relation to safeguarding that were very consistent within the sector. So we'll try and improve that. Bond has a variety of safeguarding resources, but I always sort of pick out these three as our sort of most important ones, or the ones that are the most useful. So our most used resource on the Bond website is our safeguarding policy templates. These are a really great template if you're in the start of that sort of safeguarding journey and you're trying to sort of reach out and create your policies that are going to sort of put into practice how you want to sort of do safeguarding within your organisation. These templates have been translated in 5 different languages, so Arabic, French, Swahili, Amharic and Hausa. And they are absolutely awesome. So definitely worth a check out. QR codes on there, but I'll also share a resource guide with you after too. Second resource on there is our developing and modelling a positive safeguarding culture. This is a leadership tool, that's what we call it, the leadership tool, and it works to improve safeguarding culture. So safeguarding culture it's just how we do things around here. So we're really trying to make those changes and make safeguarding actually embedded within an organisation and not just that tick box exercise that safeguarding can sometimes be seen as. The leadership tool does this in a top-down approach. So it's aimed at your sort of senior management teams, and that then filters down in a really sort of like quite strict action plan. The leadership tool is amazing. It requires dedication of time to it. It's not a quick process. The sections are about 2 to 4 hours to complete, and then we suggest an after-action review. And there's 6 of those. So it's not something that you go into lightheartedly. You really need to put some time into it, but it is absolutely, in fact, a fantastic tool. And then slightly more light touch, still on safeguarding culture, is that tool on the right there, and that's our understanding effective safeguarding culture. And this is a tool that is a conversation tool, and it can be used throughout your whole organisation. So from your sort of most junior admin levels up to your senior management team, to sort of give you an understanding of what safeguarding culture is currently like in your organisation and how you can potentially improve that and tailor it to make it work for you. Really great tools, and that one on the right is also a really good way of sort of mapping where you are on your safeguarding journey. So it's 3 columns. The one on the left is non-compliance. The one in the middle is minimal compliance, and then going up to effective safeguarding culture. We run this session with FCDO and many other organisations, but it really gives organisations an opportunity to see where they're at. And I've been really lucky to see that some organisations have said, do you know what, we're sitting in minimal compliance right now and we know where we want to get to. And I don't think it's a negative that you're still on that process of your safeguarding journey, because if you're using those tools, you're wanting to improve it. So that's just some shameless plugs there from me of our resources. going to go into our small organisation listening exercises that we hosted in February. So I'm going to start with the why we did them. So at Bond, we have 2 safeguarding working groups. One of them's the partner and a local leadership group, and they're working very much to sort of support organisations that they're partners in a locally led approach. That's very much their aim. And then our second group is a bit more broad, and it's called the Safeguarding Steering Group. And that steering group is in place to try and implement these sector-wide changes that we're talking about at Bond around safeguarding. The members of that steering group range from large charities like Oxfam and British Council all the way down to little ones like Chance for Childhood, which still aren't small in comparison to some of the organisations that are here today. But we've got a really wide range, and the steering group are really passionate about breaking the click. Safeguarding can be quite clicky, and we want to sort of be more inclusive in our approach so we can support smaller organisations as well as we do our larger organisations. We want to bring them along, and in whatever way we can do that. We wanted to also try and build informal partnerships for things like resource sharing, or just generally, I've got a question, where can I go? We wanted to sort of try and make those relationships happen. And one of the 4 questions that we asked as well was how we as Bond can support smaller organisations, because we felt we were quite exclusive too, and we wanted to improve that. So how we did it, we invited all of our small members. We invited partner members because we didn't want this just to be exclusive for members that pay for our services. Safeguarding is an important topic, and although obviously we have a membership, so some things are exclusive, we wanted this to be as inclusive as possible. So we also invited organisations such as CIDIC, which is the Small Independent Development Network Committee, and SWIDEN, which is the Southwest Independent Network, as well, Development Network. Not very good at my acronyms, apparently. We also invited Hub Cymru Africa members as well. And Emma Beecham attended on sort of Hub Cymru Africa's behalf and shared some of her thoughts and experiences that she'd been shared by sort of you guys. Each session was about half an hour, and we did that quite purposefully because we wanted it to be a short session so that we weren't asking small members or small organisations that don't have the time and resource in safeguarding to sort of commit 2 hours to 4 conversations. We needed it to be as inclusive as possible. And a member of our steering group chaired each session, and they were purely there in listening mode. They weren't there to fix the problems. We just wanted to hear what organisations are struggling with and how we can improve it. There was 4 topics. So it was, what do small organisations want from Bond? A learning according to size for organisations, coaching, peer supervision and emotional well-being, and best practice and evidence-based best practice. We wanted to end on a high, share what we're doing really well. I'm going to sort of chat about what we learned. I'm going to ignore the top one. That was very much learning for us at Bond, but I'm going to talk sort of what we heard from the last 3. So, learning according to size. This conversation actually went in 2 ways. Some of it went about learning and resources and training, and the other side sort of was about how we learn from ourselves as organisations. The first one was around translating training packages to support those working locally is a large expense that smaller organisations have. Like, they just don't have the funds for that. How they thought it would be beneficial, and when I say they, I mean small organisations, how they thought it would be beneficial, it would be for larger organisations to share the translated resources that they already have with the small so that they can adapt it for what they're currently doing. We have asked our members, our larger members, to share any sort of publicly available translated resources, and we're sort of in the process of trying to push those resources out as much as we can to support those smaller members. We also had around a challenge that it's not always easy to translate what safeguarding is. So I'll give a little anecdote, is that I went to a conference in the US in November of last year, and it was talking about safeguarding. There was around 60 professionals in the room from 60 different organisations all around the world, and they were predominantly large organisations. In the first 10 minutes of the session, we couldn't agree what the word safeguarding meant, and we're all safeguarding professionals. So small organisations that maybe don't have a safeguarding focal lead are going to struggle to define what safeguarding is. So we wanted to sort of flip the conversation on its head. So asking our small organisations, what are you doing to protect people? they were able to answer that question really quite easily. And we just needed to translate those words to make it more relevant for basically what we all know as safeguarding. And sort of safeguarding terminology, but supporting them in that learning journey of sort of teaching that safeguarding terminology is going to support them in future with future funding bids and things like that. So that was a really important thing that we learned. The next one was around coaching, peer supervision, emotional well-being for safeguarding professionals, how it can be achieved in a small organisation. So our jobs as safeguarding professionals are incredibly emotive. We hear some pretty horrific things, and we wanted to make sure that we're looking after our members of staff as much as we are looking after our survivors that are actually sort of experiencing the hardship. So again, financial resourcing was a barrier to organisations accessing support. So organisations weren't able to pay for sort of psychotherapists to come in and support their staff. Reflections were identified that once safeguarding professionals that are managing safeguarding cases finish a case, close a case, they move straight onto the next one. They didn't have that sort of break of what went well there, what didn't go well, am I okay, is the people around me okay, we just move straight on. And I think that it's important just to take the day to do that after action review. How am I feeling? What can I do to look after myself better when I'm next managing the next case? And the final sort of learning from it was organisations have a person-centred approach around the local communities that they are protecting, but they don't maybe have a person-centred approach around safeguarding professionals within their organisation. I quoted something from the session, and it was that safeguarding professionals are expected to be the superheroes of the organisation, looking after everyone else's well-being, but who's looking after the safeguarding professionals' well-being. And I thought that was really pertinent because we are expected to be those people that make it better for everyone else. And then because we're safeguarding professionals, we find that a lot of people within our own organisations come to us to talk about things because we know what to say and we have that knowledge and expertise. But it's sort of, we don't want to overfill that bath. We need to take that plug out sometimes and make sure that we're giving our safeguarding professionals the time they need to look after themselves as well. And the final one was around best practice and how small organisations are evidencing this. So small organisations are making amazing sort of steps and progress in safeguarding, but they need to be able to share that. So some things that they shared was that an organisation shared that they're getting better at pushing back at things that aren't possible. I can't do this. I haven't got capacity to do this. Let's stop taking things on if we haven't got the capacity to do it. Another organisation suggested that they sourced and created tools that are being pitched at the right level and therefore actually being used in their organisation, and it's sort of bringing back into that safeguarding culture that we're using resources that are actually being lived and breathed because they're understandable by everyone. And I think there's a really good resource out there from the Open University which teaches, which sort of is a course around safeguarding, and it's sort of broken into 3 or 4 weeks. The first week is really achievable and attainable and people can understand it. After that, it gets really quite complex, and we need to sort of start looking at training packages that are sort of pitched at the right level. One organisation shared that their leadership team understood and were empowering about safeguarding, and they found that their leadership team was supportive of the safeguarding work, and I think that's super important as well. Goes back to that leadership tool I said about at the start, because how much easier it's to do your job when you're not getting pushed back so by your own internal sort of politics. So really important one. And another one was around flipping that conversation on the head, and this is something we're hoping to be able to get from this attendee, was they created a conversation starter sort of document which allowed them to flip that conversation on the head around this is what we're doing to protect people and this is how it relates to safeguarding. So that's what we learned from our listening exercises. Obviously there were so many more outputs from it and there was so much more that we heard, but I wanted to try and summarise it as best as I could. I was super keen that, and I think we've all been guilty of this before, we've done these lesson exercises, we've heard, and I didn't want to do nothing with it. So what's next? Our plans are to have 5 skills mapping sessions. They're going to be an hour long and they're going to be spread out throughout 2023. So that, again, they're more accessible for people that we know haven't got the safeguarding resource and the time. They're going to be hosted by one of the steering group and they're going to be joined by a subject matter expert. And the steering group member will sort of take in the questions, and the subject matter expert are planning there to support the organisations on these 5 topics. So the themes that we're going for is developing learning to work with your organisation. So that's around tailoring, I'll get there eventually, tailoring training to fit the resources available that you've got in your organisation and that are out there. The next one was around emotional wellbeing of safeguarding practitioners. That will most likely be joined by a psychotherapist that can be able to support us with our peer coaching, which is super important. And peer coaching is proven to reduce stress and fatigue within safeguarding professionals by about 33%. So it's really important we do that peer sort of coaching and supervision. Next one is conversation starters. So what organisations are already doing and how to convert that into risk and compliance. So that document I was suggesting about, it's around sort of, doing a session on that. What to do when you're just starting out. So everyone started their safeguarding journey. If you've already started that, that's fantastic. But everyone's on this journey because it doesn't sit stagnant. And we want to also ensure that it's the culture of safeguarding is embedded from the very start, because it's a lot easier to, when you're first set something up, create it as a culture instead of putting something in place and then try to embed it later on. So we're going to get that in from the very start. And the final one is around being incident ready. What do we need? So that's twofold. So it's incident ready as in incidents that happen around the world that we need to be prepared to be able to go straight into very quickly. So for example, around safer recruitment, how we need to do that in a quick process to be able to support in those sort of humanitarian situations, but also being instant ready of, we've had this safeguarding case reported to us, how can we deal with it? So that one's twofold. This session really today is just an invite to you guys that I'll share all of the details of these sessions as and when they happen with sort of Hub Cymru Africa, and we really want everyone to attend because we want it, as I say, to be really inclusive and to get as many people there as possible to be able to sort of use these learning skills. And I'm going to open the floor to sort of ask any questions that can be around our resources, around our listening exercises, but also no pressure. Go for it.
I have two. Can I ask two questions?
Of course you can, yeah.
One is around, we work with some organisations in Africa that are CBOs.
Mm-hmm.
So they, the people of the community make up the organisation. So they are part of the community.
Yep.
And so in terms of safeguarding, there has been challenges in the sense of, we have certain standards and guidance in our safeguarding practices saying you're not allowed to have relationships with community members, but when they are the community, how do you address that? And then the second question is, how do we take what Lady Phil talked about this morning and apply it to this safeguarding? Like, how can we keep our staff, partners and community members safe? So, some of the policies that our partners have will say we don't discriminate and people are, but then when the national legislation says you need to report someone for being gay to the police, how do we,
They're two quite elusive questions, not at all. I don't know if I can answer those right now because it's not the first time I've been asked them. However, there's food for thought on both of them. So yes, around the sexual relationships with the people that you're supporting, it's obviously part of the 6 commitments, isn't it? But how do you implement that when it is the local community? It's incredibly tough, and it's around sort of risk managing, being clear on what you're doing, having that clear process. But I think it's around sharing with your with the CBOs that the reason why that's not just there for no reason. It's there to prevent allegation against them, to be able to support them in their work continuing. So I think it's around really clear communication and sort of giving them these training opportunities to understand why we do that. So that's the first.
Tell them not to have a relationship when they're.
No, and I think there needs to be in your organisation a degree of risk management in the sense that you most likely know that's going to happen, and how you're going to do everything you can to prevent that from happening. So showing that you're doing everything that you can to prevent that from happening. But I think that's a question that's not the first time that I've been asked it, or it's been asked in a bigger, wider context. So maybe I'll get back to you and we can factor that into these skills mapping sessions as well, around the incident ready one. So that was the first question. Second one was
context of LGBTQ rights and how what Lady Phil talked about this
Yeah.
morning, the context that we're operating in. How do you manage the tensions between a safeguarding
Yeah.
policy which says you'll keep people safe, you'll
Yeah.
protect them, you won't discriminate, etc., but the legislation of that doesn't actually
and I've heard this
enable
before.
that.
Yeah, I've heard this before around reporting to a local community, reporting methods, i.e. the police in the local context, when they've committed, say, a sexual act against say it's a male, on a child male, because you also have a duty to protect the alleged perpetrator in that situation. And as you say, that could be, as we heard from this morning's speech, it could be a very harsh sentence on them, including, the unspeakable, the unthinkable even. So how we protect them is we need to manage sometimes those cases internally. The importance of safer recruitment to those that person doesn't work in this kind of context, again, where they have access to people. That wasn't massively your question. It was around how we protect people as a whole. And again, I think it's around, and I don't have all the answers because I'm not a subject matter in all of these things, subject matter expert in all of these things, but I think we need to ensure that we're doing as much as we can. We're never going to be able to get this 100% right. And I think that's the big thing, is that we want everything to be perfect. And I think there's still a lot of shame in reports coming into organisations because people don't want reports because they think we're failing because we're safeguarding cases in.
I'd say any organisation that hasn't had a case come in means your safeguarding is working.
I tend to agree. So I think to an extent, and I don't really want to say this, but things are going to happen that we aren't going to be able to always control, especially when we're based in the UK and we're trying to operate in these local contexts. It's a really tough way of working. I've just batted both of those questions, but maybe we can bilaterally talk about those.
It's just there waiting to go around in my head.
And they're not isolated to just you. I think they're questions that a lot of people ask. Any other questions? Nope. Amazing. Well, thank you for listening. I've shoved my email address up there, and also you've got it on the delegates information. Feel free to drop me an email. Talk about this more. I'm more happy to go into more details when we can. So yeah, I'm always around.